Greetings to you, Crocodile Army. Language is a fascinating thing. The way we can communicate, express ourselves, and evoke fiery passion just by putting certain syllables together is nothing short of amazing. However, it's the shared meaning behind the words that enables us to communicate effectively and persuade others to come over to a position that we hold. What happens though when we don't see words in the same way? I don't mean cases where we have at least a somewhat shared understanding of what words mean, but simply disagree on the characterization of the idea, like with so much rhetoric in the theater of politics. For instance, in the realm of same-sex marriage, one side calls themselves advocates for marriage equality, and the other side says they're defending marriage. Thankfully, equality is winning that battle these days. It seems fairly obvious why nobody's calling their side the traditional marriage attackers or the bigoted homophobic jerks, even if that's how the other side sees them. Using any of the more common descriptors, there's very little doubt about which side you're on. Nobody's going to mistake it for any other issue or any other position on that issue, so it all kind of works and we can make ourselves understood. There are also some situations where there are two different sides to the issue, but the word is the issue, and then you're talking about the perception of a word itself. That's where the Washington Redskins football team finds themselves these days, and it was brilliantly brought to light through comedy on South Park about a month ago and on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. I've lived in the DC area for 17 years, and I've watched this unfold locally. We all know that Redskins is referring to Native Americans, but is it a racial slur? The owner of the Redskins, Dan Snyder, is widely disliked locally for his greed and micromanagement of the team. Even people like me, who had been fairly ambivalent on the issue, laughed at him for creating a website called RedskinsFacts.com, all about how much the fans love the team name and what it means to them. Native American groups, however, consider it a racial slur, and always have, but much of the general public have always seen it as just a team name, until recently. The team name has been in use for several decades, and while it appears that it was well known as a racial slur a long time ago, it had long since faded into history for most people. It's a bit unfortunate in a way, because the ugly racial slur aspect of the word had been almost entirely extinguished and replaced by a connotation that was neutral at worst. It would be nice if the N-word and other racial slurs would disappear so quietly. Though I've never heard anyone use redskin as a slur, now that it's been dredged up again, the name probably should be changed. Activists should take note of one thing, though. Dan Snyder won't care unless you hit him right in the wallet. Anyone who really knows me knows that I care a great deal about people and how they're treated. I don't want people to suffer unnecessarily or undeservedly, and there's far too much of that in the world. Most of us can identify something which could unfairly cause others to think less of us. I'm a straight, married, white male homeowner with no significant medical conditions who's financially fairly comfortable in a very good career living in the most powerful country in the world. I'm well aware of how good I have it, and that a fair amount of it has to do with factors way beyond my control. It has also come to my attention that I am privileged. Now, I've done enough reading on this word to understand what some people mean by it in terms of social struggles, and in that context, they're technically right. But that does not mean that I think the use of that word is helpful in this case. When you go from academia to the rest of the world expecting them to know what you mean by privilege, you then have to overcome extra resistance and explain what you mean by privilege, because the word already has an established meaning. The word has often false connotations that you have power or money, grew up well off, or were handed money via family connections if you use it in that way. It's a terrible word to use in an everyday context, and will turn people off who would otherwise be supportive of the cause of those who were discriminated against, making unnecessary enemies. This is compounded by the use of the word as a weapon to bludgeon those who don't like the views and tactics used by some of those pushing for needed change. Using a word like privilege just creates unnecessary friction to their causes. I want to see a world with more equality too, and I think most of us do. But I'd also like to see those who are fighting with us take a more effective stance by changing how we use language. Does anyone have any better suggestions? I'd love to hear them.